and welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. It's Alex Swallow here, and today we have episode number 96, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to my wonderful guest, Rebecca Norton. Have you ever pondered how our surroundings affect our ability to think? And can we connect with our sense of place and purpose by immersing ourselves in nature? In this episode of the Coach's Journey podcast, walking coach Rebecca Norton brings her combined expertise in coaching and mountain leadership to bear on these questions and many more. We explore the lasting impact that access to the natural world has on our lives, from infancy through to adulthood, and how the coaching walks that Rebecca offers her clients help them to navigate new pathways, both in the physical environment and their internal worlds. Rebecca, who delivers workshop facilitation and social prescribing alongside her coaching and wonder walks, describes how she carefully built up her coaching business while continually developing her skills and experience as an outdoor activities instructor. She links the idea of being a tourist in your own city and developing curiosity about new perspectives with the importance of getting alongside coaching clients and seeing the world through their eyes. The many twists, turns, ups and downs of Rebecca's adventures in the hills acts as a powerful metaphor for journeys through the challenges of careers, relationships, families, and life decisions. Just as her clients gain new perspective on their lives as they ascend into the hills with Rebecca, so do we as she reflects on her unique, brilliant approach to coaching conversations and many other aspects of her work. In this episode, we also talk about the power of experiencing coaching techniques from both sides, how to integrate experiences as we train and gain qualifications, the barriers we place between ourselves and our own fulfillment, seeing who we need to become in order to achieve our goals, how to lower the importance of gaining a client when building your coaching business. Rebecca also reminds us that personal development can be a grueling expedition, and that if we fail to interrogate our deeper purpose and connect the why that guides us, we can be at risk of losing our way. She generously ends this episode with an array of tips to help coaches stay at their best. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Rebecca Norton, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into our conversations too. And just to make the listeners aware that we know each other via the Sheffield Coaching Exchange, local coaching meetup here in Sheffield. And we've already had the chance to have a bit of a conversation, but I came away from my one-to-one conversation with you wanting more, wanting to find out more about you, and just thought it'd be brilliant to be able to introduce the listeners to your work and to your life and to some things that are important to you. So where would you like to start, really? If you were going to tell the listeners a bit about yourself and your life, you can start wherever you like. We don't have to go completely chronologically, but where would you like to start?
Oh, such a good question. I loved the question beforehand as well, actually, that you sent over. The first thing that popped into my mind was jack of all trades. I have many interests. I'm a curious person. I love learning. I love doing lots of different things. So I used to refer to myself as a jack of all trades for quite a while. But I always saw that as a little bit of a negative. It's one of those, the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. However, last year, I think it was, I learned the full phrase, and that's not the full phrase, there's more to it. So a jack of all trades, master of none, oftentimes better than a master of one. So originally it was intended as a compliment, not a slight. So once I learned the full saying, it's like, yeah, I'm happy to be jack of all trades. So I guess that's where I'd like to start, I suppose, because I've done many different things in my working life. And at one point I did used to see that as a bit of why can't you just stick at one thing? But I can't, because I keep evolving, I keep learning more, and I want to learn more, and I love doing lots of different things.
That's great. I would say another thing I wanted to say to the audience about you is that you're a person that when I joined the local coaching community, like you just you seem to me one of the sort of big local figures that was involved with a lot of stuff. That's how you came across, and just to people in on this is that one of the reasons that was because we have a mindful moment when we have our meetups, which are sometimes online, sometimes in person. And Rebecca was also often asked to do those and always led us so beautifully. And so I sort of saw you as a go-to person for that, but also like as a go-to person locally in the community. And I also could tell from what you did, and which I'm sure we'll get onto, that you have a real love of the outdoors and you do a lot of walking coaching and a lot of walking in general, which was something that I thought would be useful for the listeners to hear about. But again, starting wherever you like, as far back as you like, what would you like to tell us about that journey, that jack of all trades journey, as it were?
I suppose a pivotal moment for me was when I discovered, or somebody told me about the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it happened to coincide with the year I did the Camp America program as well. So it's what I call a life-changing summer. The book itself opened my eyes to this world of personal development and personal growth. It was the first time that I've sort of come across that. And also the fact that I'd gone across the pond, as it were, to America. It was the first time that I'd been away from home for an extended period of time. And meeting Americans who are so bold and confident, and I was sort of like a rabbit in headlights when I first got there. So it was just a life-changing summer, I think, and it really helped to build my confidence and, just like I said, open my eyes to personal development. And that's where it started, I suppose. I got hooked after that. It was such a brilliant book. And then, from there I did all sorts of different things and what have you.
So I've got a couple of questions first. Firstly, I think I know what Camp America is, but maybe not everyone will. So can you tell us what happened for Camp America?
Yeah, so Camp America is a program that's generally done by youngsters, sort of older teenagers, early 20s, and it's going across to America, and it's working on different types of youth camps. Because of my experience as a Girl Guide leader, I was placed on a Girl Scout camp. So you don't choose which one you get placed on, but they'll sort of try and place you or match you with your interests and things. So it was quite a basic camp in some respects. It was on the edge of Baxter State Park in the state of Maine. Beautiful location, absolutely stunning. And we were in these big sort of canvas, what they call platform tents. So it's had a wooden base, but then a canvas tent over the top of it. So it was basic. They were drop loos. So if you know what I mean by drop loos, in other words.
I do. Unfortunately, I do. I think I first heard of him in a Roald Dahl book when he was in the army, like one of his autobiographical books. I heard of a drop toilet as a child, and didn't like the sound of it then.
So it basically, it is. It's now. I mean, this is a long time ago. It was a proper toilet seat, I think, but it basically drops into a hole under the platform where the toilet. Nothing glamorous there at all. We did have showers, so don't get me wrong, we weren't filthy or stinky for the whole summer, but they were drop loos and very limited facilities that we had. But it was such an amazing experience, and again, that opened up my eyes to travel. I got the travel bug after that, and I did quite a bit of traveling for a few years after, on and off, just for short periods of time. But I traveled quite extensively after that and absolutely loved it, and made some really lovely friend that I stayed in touch with for a long, long time after that. So yes, it was. I was there. The camp. We had children on the camp for about 6 or 8 weeks, I think, and I was there a little bit either side of that, and then travelled for a few weeks after that experience. And I did that for 2 summers while I was out there. So you sort of get pocket money. You don't get paid as such, but you get pocket money and you get your sort of your airfare paid and things. So it's a good way of meeting new people, seeing the world a little bit, and gaining some experience. Definitely.
And it's really interesting. Obviously, I know you're linked to girl guiding, and how did that come about? Like, how did you originally get involved in any sort of organization growing up? Well, how did that end up happening? And does that link to your love of the outdoors? Does your love of outdoors come from somewhere else? What do you think that's from?
So I joined Brownies when I was, I don't know, I would have been 7 or 8 probably. So you can join brownies at 7. So I imagine I was around about that age. And my mum just took me along. I don't remember whether I indicated an interest in that or not, but I mean, I grew up in, and I'm still in the same area actually. It's not a particularly well-off area. And the brownie unit was in this old house. There was no carpets in it. It was bare floorboards, very cold in winter. It had a garden space. But I got introduced to brownies at that point. Then I moved into guides, which was in a different place, but again, similarly, a very old church that was very cold in winter. And at that point, I mean, we did all sorts of different things, crafts and activities and what have you. So I did enjoy it. I left guides when I was probably 12, 13-ish. I think I didn't particularly want to move up to the next section, which was Rangers at that point. But it introduced me to girl guiding. I don't think I realised at that point that it was a global organisation, because we did do some events outside of Sheffield, but not so many, and we went camping. And actually, the fact that I love camping is certainly not down to guides. I just remember going on a couple of camps. One, there were some girls who weren't particularly nice that I was sharing the tent with. So I didn't particularly enjoy the camp. It was all right, and luckily the weather was nice. But I also remember freezing in a huge ridge tent with just another couple of girls one time when it must have been sort of spring or autumn, I think. But it was so cold, and obviously then, as kids, you don't really have. And at that time, the camping equipment wasn't brilliant. I do enjoy camping, but it's not down to guys. I like camping. But yes, I had some really, I did have some fun times with them. But I got back into guiding as an adult when I was 18-ish. So when I went to university, I went on the like the Freshers' Fair thing and got introduced to some guiding people. And one of them was looking for some help at her unit. And I was doing my Gold Duke of Edinburgh at the time, and as part of that, you have to do volunteering element. And I thought, oh well, that's brilliant. It'll tick off that element of that as well. And I've been at the unit ever since, basically, which is, gosh, probably over 25 years. I hate to admit that now, but yeah. So, but as an adult, I realised how big an organisation it is, and how how great an organisation it is, and the experiences I've had as an adult have been absolutely amazing. I've fully embraced it as an adult. I've done some work for Girl Guiding. I've done some paid work. I've done lots of volunteering things for them besides being a unit leader. I was one of the sort of outdoor activities coordinators for a while. I was a trainer for a little while, so I've been abroad with them. I've done all sorts of stuff since being an adult leader.
It's
So yeah.
amazing. I always find it inspiring to hear that. I don't know whether you think this, as you're a born and bred Sheffielder, and I'm not, even though I now live here. Like that you've grown up here. One of the things that I find very interesting about Sheffield, and I'd be really curious to people listening in how they feel this about where they live. I feel Sheffield people are really outdoorsy. And I'm doing air quotes for people who aren't watching the video. And like I grew up with a family who were pretty outdoorsy. Walking was default. Even I now walk quite a lot. But since coming to Sheffield, for example, it's normal to meet people who are into climbing, or you'll know someone who goes fell running, or something like that, or mountaineering, as we might go on to talk about for you, and things like that. And a friend that I made here was secretary, or is secretary, of a climbing club. And I don't know, did you, growing up, did you find people quite outdoorsy? Is that stereotype true in your opinion? And has that affected how you've then gone on to live your life, do you think?
I mean, Sheffield is known as the outdoor city, so,
Yeah.
and it's got a good reputation for that. And certainly as children, we were outdoors a lot, just playing in the garden and building dens in the garden, or our parents would take us out bike riding and walking. We probably did more bike riding as kids, actually, and walking and stuff. So we did spend a lot of time outdoors. But I don't think I realised, I think I took Sheffield for granted.
Mm,
Outdoorsness of it until I
yeah.
was an adult. It was only probably in my mid-20s even. I was on a training course somewhere, and they mentioned the fact that Sheffield has got one of the most parks and green spaces in the UK, and I'm thinking, doesn't everybody have parks
Yeah.
and green spaces on their doorstep? So it was only then that I sort of twigged that not everywhere in the UK has so much green space. So yeah, I think it was just one of those things that I took for granted, that we've got the Peak District and we've got other areas. You know, everybody thinks of the Peak District, but actually the Peak District is on the opposite side of the city to me. So I'm on the north of the city, but there's some beautiful places near me as well. You know, within sort of 10 minutes drive, I can be out towards sort of Barnsley and Penistone, and there's some beautiful areas there as well. So incredibly lucky to have so much green space on our doorstep here, definitely. And I think you're right. A lot of students come to Sheffield and stay in Sheffield, and a lot of them come because they want that outdoor side of life and what have you. So it's definitely set up for that, I think. Yeah, and you can it's surprising how you can get around the city without having to go on sort of main roads and things like that. So they're trying to improve that even more as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I think during the pandemic, my wife and I discovered more of that. I remember, there was a local river that I didn't realize, and she found it. It had a path next to it, and I was like, "Well, why do people care about this particular river?" Because there's some campaign about not building houses in the valley, and I thought, well, but I don't even normally get to see the nature there. And then all of a sudden, we found this path, or my wife found this path that went off, and then we found other paths, and it's like it's just incredibly opened up. And I'm someone who grew up. I grew up in Brighton, but I grew up quite near nature. But I think Sheffield, in many ways, is on a different level. And as you say, just the parks and the green spaces more in the centre of the city. There's some enormous parks, and I think there's perhaps a wider thing here, which is about whatever you grow up with, it's very hard not to sort of step outside that, and perhaps only as an adult, or if you're a person, I suppose, who moves around a lot due to your parents' job or something, can you realize the difference between these things? But it's only when you go somewhere else, and Sheffield isn't perfect, no, it's perfect, but you can be like, oh, that's special. That's really something, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's bizarre, isn't it? So last year I did the Megatron. Have you come across the Sheffield
I
Megatron,
think,
which is
is this under the station?
it's under the underground river system
Yeah.
in Sheffield. So I'd heard about it a few years ago, and I thought, oh, I'd love to do that. And you can get these tours that you step into the river and you basically walk through the rivers into the centre of Sheffield, under a lot of the roads and things. You
Oh
get to
my
see bits of
gosh.
it, but you're under the road level, so you can see above and you see the buildings from this completely different angle. And then yes, you're right, you go under the Sheffield station as well, and that's on another level again. You know, the fact that we've got this, but I think that's where Sheffield, I think they are trying to improve that, is some cities really celebrate their rivers and things, where
Mm,
Sheffield hidden a lot of their rivers.
yeah.
But we did find out part of the reason for that when they started sort of culverting them, when they put the tunnels over, is because it was open sewerage at one
Yeah.
point, and just a lot of not nice
I've
things were
heard that
going in
too.
the river, so they covered them. But now they are starting to open up little bits, and they're putting what they call these little pocket parks at the side of them and what have you. So they're trying to sort of join up these little pocket parks and areas of green space along the river so people can access them more easily as well, which is lovely.
I'm really excited about. I heard the same thing about covering them, because the area where the castle is, and if people come to Sheffield, might be like, "Well, where on earth is this castle?" It was a massive. It was a massive castle. Now there's just some ruins, and they were doing excavations. And my wife and I had the chance to go in with an archaeologist, just as a member of the public, and see it. And there's like there used to be a slaughterhouse there that went into the river, but also that's one of the sites where they're making one of these almost pocket parks, and there's going to be a park where the castle used to be. And I mean, I already think that Sheffield is great for public space, but sometimes it's the linking of between the different bits, and it is what's so special. And also, it brings the past alive, because you realise how things must have looked once upon a time.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got the Victoria Keys as well, and again, I know they're trying to make that incorporated into the city centre a little bit more easily so people can access that. But obviously that's quite old as well, with the canals and the barges that used to come into there for the industry side of things. But you're right, within the city centre, we've got these amazing pockets of green spaces, green and blue spaces, I suppose, really. That's just, and I love it now. I think it's so nice to walk through the city centre. As I think, again, this is where you take it for granted, isn't it? If you go to somewhere else, you're a tourist, but I highly recommend being a tourist in your own city for a day and going and exploring it, wearing a different set of glasses, whatever you want to call it, and just seeing it from a completely different angle. And it's amazing what you notice.
Yeah, it is. I did that. I remember doing that in Brighton when there was a sewer tour. So when you were talking about, going underneath in the rivers and whatever, I did a sewer tour in Brighton, and you pop up in the middle of the old Stein and stuff, and it's just, again, it's what it makes you realise, I think, is it makes you appreciate your city in a different way when you see it through the eyes of a tourist, but it also helps you to remember, and from like a coaching perspective, I think it's important that everybody sees the world slightly differently, even if they live next door, or even if in some ways they have a similar life experience. I mean, even just people in different parts of the same city can view the city in a completely different way, perhaps. And so I think it encourages that sort of thought exercise, or that sort of experiment encourages us just to walk in someone else's shoes for a bit and imagine what it must be like for them.
Yeah, and I have, you mentioned it in the intro, but I have done a couple of coaching walks around Sheffield city centre as well, and sort of like when I first started out, I did wonder walks. I do them a little bit now, but not as much as I did. But I like actually walking through the city because it would challenge me, because I would think, right, where can I go and look for these little pockets of greenery or just interesting buildings? Because the other thing, our heads are down or we're concentrating on something else, we forget to look up and see the amazing building. So I would plan these routes around the city centre, taking people to these green spaces or different buildings and things, and encourage people to look at things from a different angle. And it's so nice to be able, like you said, you see things from a different perspective. And the outdoors, I think this is one of the reasons why I like doing the coaching outdoors. It helps you to see things from a different perspective, and it encourages you to look. Certainly for me, I see so many metaphors in the outdoors with life. And I think sometimes that helps us to understand and reflect on experiences at a deeper level.
Hugely, and I really want to get onto the walking coaching as well. It's something I'd like to learn more about, but I think we've done some of the background, some of the outdoor stuff. We've still got stuff to unpack, but I'd like to ask you the question, which is the one question that we tend to ask all our guests, which is, when did you hear about this thing called coaching? Can you remember where you were, what it was like, and how did you become a coach?
Again, it's one of those things that I think it's sort of seeped into my consciousness somehow about coaching. I think I'd read an article about life coaching or something, and it sounded quite interesting because I'm curious and I like personal development stuff. And it sort of coincided a time when, like we've already said, I do love walking, and I was out walking around Langsett Reservoir, and I just remember thinking how much I enjoy walking and the feeling I get after going on a good walk or any walk outdoors, and literally blowing away the cobwebs. So shifting my energy, changing my sort of my physiology, the state that you're in when you're out walking, and just feeling so much, well, so many different feelings. Feel calmer, yet energized, and which it sounds contradictory, but it's not really. It's physically calm but energized about what you're thinking. Somehow you manage to untangle your thoughts, and I certainly get lots of ideas when I'm out walking, because it gives my brain an opportunity to process things and ponder things. So I just thought, you know what, I'd love to be able to help other people get the same experiences that I get from walking outdoors. And I thought I'd sort of linked it with the life coach, and I thought I'd like to be able to coach people outdoors and help them sort of experience this in a proper way. So I started researching into life coaching a little bit more. And at that point, a lot of the courses were either, do you remember you used to get them on like CDs?
I know the Tony Robbinsy type ones were. Yeah.
So I joined
CDs,
quite
I
a few
love
of
it.
these organisations that were doing like distance learning and send you a pack of CDs and what have you. And there were one or two. There weren't actually that many around when I started looking, but I came across the Coaching Academy, and they were doing these in-person events, and that was much more up my street. I didn't fancy the thought of just sitting and watching something. I like the interaction and being around people. And they had these taster events, so you would go along to taster events for a weekend and experience what they did. And they had one in Leeds, which is obviously not too far away. So I decided to book that. And it was actually on my 35th birthday that I went up. So it was this 2-day event. And to join their program, you had to go on a taster weekend. You couldn't just sign up, you had to be part of these taster weekends and things. And I remember going in and really enjoying it. And I thought, wow, this is good stuff. But I'm always one of these people who's a little bit cautious, because I thought, I know they're going to try and sell me, the program and everything. So I didn't sign up there and then, but it had planted a seed. And I knew I probably would, but I didn't want to rush into the decision because it's quite, it's a decent financial
Yeah.
investment that you're making. So I obviously they got my details, and I think it was probably about a month or 2 months later that I actually signed up and had they do like a telephone interview type thing with you just to check you out, why you want to do it and that sort of thing. And so I did sign up with the coaching academy, and I was very lucky because I think actually a lot of their courses that they do now do tend to be online. Since COVID, unfortunately, it changed the scene a little bit with some of these things, but all the sessions that I went to, the training days were all in person. So I absolutely loved it. And again, I made some wonderful contacts with people, and the energy of the days were amazing. I mean, you'd be exhausted by the end of the day because you were taking in so much and practicing, but it was just exhilarating, and obviously there were some bits online as well, but the actual training days were in person, and absolutely loved the process. And like, wow. And that's how I got into coaching.
Amazing. It's lovely to hear your energy and your enthusiasm around like remembering that time and what it was like for you. Do you when you first heard about coaching, or you were thinking about, how you might like to help people, did you like, how much of a plan did you have in your head? Because to me, like, from the outside it sounds like, okay, you knew that you liked being outside and you knew that you wanted to help people and you thought you could combine those two things. So from the outside that sounds quite strategic, but I'm sure there's all sorts of other things going on, your career up to that point,
Yeah.
etc. Like at the start you wouldn't know how long it would take to train to be a coach, etc., etc. So yeah, what was that sort of interplay in your head back then? Were you like, I'm heading towards my goal, or how did that feel?
I love the idea that you think I had a strategy behind it. I wish I did, I suppose there was a bit of a strategy. I decided that I could become a coach. And I mean, to be fair, before that though, I suppose I'll give a bit more
Yeah,
background. So
please.
like I said, I've done various different training courses and all sorts. So I went to university, and again, even going to university, I didn't do what I'd originally set out to do. So originally I'd applied to be a physiotherapist, only because my best friend was doing that and I didn't have any better ideas, basically. But I did, I mean, I threw myself into it because I went and did work experience. I went and spoke to loads of different physiotherapists in different settings. I got to speak to somebody. I don't know whether you'd have known this, but John Lewis had their own physiotherapist or well-being person. So I went to speak to somebody at John Lewis in there. I went to speak to somebody at Sheffield Wednesday. I went to private clinics. I went to where else did I go? Sort of other places, and spoke to lots of different physiotherapists and got experience in it. And it sounded, yeah, all right. My grades weren't going to be good enough to get into physio course, and so I didn't get a place. So I got onto sport and exercise science through clearing. My mum helped me sort of go through different ideas and things, and when we looked at the different modules, it sounded quite good. So I did that. I didn't have any desire to go back and resit my A levels and make them any better. It just didn't appeal to me. But so I was offered a place on sport and exercise science, and I loved it actually. Again, there was some really great modules in that, around physiology and biology side of stuff, biomechanics, which luckily I could drop after. That was the only side I didn't like, the biomechanics side. Too technical and too too many physics things within that. But we did nutrition. I did sports injury. So there was a module around sports injury, a module around nutrition, psychology as well. So there was exercise psychology as well as sports psychology. So sports psychology was more around sort of the performance side of things, but the exercise psychology was much more around sort of the well-being type thing and how exercise makes you feel in terms of how it can be useful for stress and depression. Really loved that. And I suppose that side of it sort of planted a seed as well. And I got into knowing, I wanted to know more about that, and it fascinated me. So I did that at university. Again, I didn't have a plan. There's no direct career route into sport and exercise science as a career. And I ended up taking a temporary job in a secondary school as a learning support assistant. Again, my gosh, that opened my eyes. I just don't think I'd realised until that point that kids can get to secondary school and not read and write. I think I'd been quite naive up until that point, and I worked in quite a challenging school in Sheffield, and I loved it. I really did love it, but it was hard, emotionally hard, I think, as well as sort of challenging in terms of behaviour wise and things. But so that opened my eyes up to, wow, kids can get to school and not being able to read and write. How do they get through the net like that? And I was also introduced to an organisation called Skillforce while I was working there, and that's how I got into more of the outdoor side of things. So they're generally ex-military personnel who worked with disaffected kids, so they would come into the school and actually work with the kids who were struggling for one reason or another and do a lot of outdoor type things with them and practical things. And they needed a female member of staff to go on one of their sort of residential, so yeah, I'll go, put my hand up, and I really enjoyed working with them. And they encouraged me to apply for a vacancy that came up within their organisation. And in the end, I went to interview, and I'm sure they would have offered me the job, but I decided that actually I didn't have such a lot of experience within the outdoor sector at that point. And I'd seen this course down at West Notts College called Outdoor Education. So I applied for that. So that's the other thing. I've been in and out of education since leaving school. I'm not one of these big fans of school. I'm not one of these people who think, oh, school were best days of your life. Like, no, they weren't. I would never want to go back to school. But choosing to go back as an adult is completely different. So I went back and studied outdoor education for a couple of years, and that's when I got into. So although we'd been an outdoorsy type family, this was outdoors on a different level. We did sort of the proper hill walking, rock climbing. We did a bit of everything actually, a bit of caving, power boating, mountain biking.
Wow.
Over the 2-year period, we did lots of different water sports and land-based activities and things, and that's when I started doing my mountain leader training, and really got into the outdoors properly. So that's where that came into it, basically. So yeah, so that my career route is one of those what you might call the squiggly career. I'm sure you may have come across the term squiggly career. It's definitely a squiggly career. So I started doing a bit of freelance work in the outdoor industry as well, but I think it's probably changing a little bit. But the outdoor activity industry had quite a reputation for being very gung ho, and and I'm not a gung ho sort of person or whatever. I want people to go into the outdoors and enjoy it. I don't want to beast them up a hill or whatever you want to call it. I want people to actually enjoy the experience, appreciate it, and want to go back. So I never got into that full time, but I did do bits of instructing for a little while, and I still do a little bit now actually for Girl Guide in Sheffield at one of their outdoor activity centres. And I enjoy doing that, introducing people to the outdoors and things. So that's where I built up my experience, and that's how I started on the learning curve to getting my mountain leader. But that's a hard it's a hard program. So I went from a mountain leader assessment in Wales, and which is a full on assessment. I think it was about a 4-day assessment. It's proper full on. So you have to do like a question paper, and they do some skills based stuff with you, and then you actually do, I think it was a 2-night expedition in the wild as well. And I got deferred on my night navigation. I knew that wasn't my strong point. So I didn't really expect to pass, but I thought, well, I need to go and test myself out and see where I need to improve, basically. And you have 5 years to go back and resit some of the bits that you sort of missed out. So I virtually left it till the 5-year point before I pulled my finger out and decided, right, I don't want to waste this. So I did some extra training, and I went out and practiced. I dragged family and friends out in the dark and what have you to practice my night navigation skills. And I redid that element round sort of Derwent and Ladybower area. And I did pass, and I earned my pass. I genuinely felt like I earned my pass because it was a horrible night. Actually, we set off at sort of dusk with this. Again, you do random things when you're in the outdoors. So I met this random guy. I don't think I'd met him before. We'd only conversed via email and stuff. So meeting somebody in a car park who you don't know and then go off on a walk with them in the dark. How cool is that? So off we went, and it was really misty, and then it started raining and stuff. So you couldn't see, you could barely see anything in front of yourself. And I messed up a little bit on the first leg. So I had stern words with myself. So this is where your sort of personal development and mindset comes in. I had stern words with myself, and I thought, Rebecca, you can do this. Come on, just concentrate. And after a couple of hours of plodding around the hillside, getting very hot and sweaty and very wet from the rain and what have you, the assessor said, "Well done, you've passed." And it's like, oh, thank goodness for that, And it was such a relief, but so I was so proud of myself for sticking in and getting to that point. So although it sounds daft, having that piece of paper and being assessed and saying, yes, you're competent, was a massive thing for me. So I have got my mountain leader, and I did earn it. I did do the work to get it. So yeah, it was amazing. So that's where I got to that.
It's amazing, Rebecca. And no, it doesn't sound daft at all, because it was funny. I was just reflecting on the fact that when we met up locally and had a chat 1-to-1, because I know you're very outdoorsy and it wasn't a terrible day, and I think my local park's very nice, I suggested we went out for a walk afterwards. But it's just because the path was a little bit icy and stuff. And, I'm basically going on a walk with someone like Bear Grylls, and I'm like, oh, that path's a bit icy, and you've got, your mountain leader qualification. I was just thinking but that's how I could tell that you can. What I think is impressive is when, or very interesting for me, is that I get the impression that you get a lot out of doing the things that are a bit of a stretch, and then just going for a walk anywhere to clear your head. It's not, as you said, that kind of like very, oh yeah, we've got to put ourselves through this every day. It's a mix of things, isn't it? Or at least that's how it seems to be.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have to go up a big hill to get the hit from being outdoors.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's why I want to introduce elements of outdoors. So there are some outdoor coaches who do the big hill walks and stuff. I know a couple of coaches within the area, within the region, who do those sort of bigger walks and take clients up into the hills and stuff. I am quite happy to do that, but I'm also happy to introduce people to their local green space and their local parks and the country parks and things, because that's accessible, and I want people to know that that's accessible, that they can do that anytime they want. You don't need special equipment. You put some comfortable shoes on, and that's it. For me, part of it is about helping people access it on a regular basis. The outdoors, and you can still get, just sitting in your garden, whatever. I think I just want to encourage people to tap into the power of nature, the power of the outdoors, for helping us to feel better, to relax, to quieten your mind, whatever. So yeah, I'm as happy in my local park and garden as I am up a hillside or by the coast. I'm a big fan of the seaside. I love going to the seaside and walking along a beach as well. Yeah, definitely. Any outdoor space is good with me.
So I was just thinking, there's so many directions in which we could go, but one thing I really wanted to ask you, and you don't have to say yes to this, but seeing as I've got you on the program, which is that if, from a coach's perspective, and obviously a lot of people who listen to this podcast are themselves coaches, or in some cases are thinking of becoming coaches. So for me, when I first started listening to the podcast, before I became a co-host, I was just thinking about being a coach. I hadn't done any training or had any clients. And so what I was wondering is, if there's a coach listening right now who feels that they would like to do some walking coaching, Are there some sort of principles of it, or some tips or tricks, or how, where would they start? Do you have any tips around anything from length of walk to the type of coaching? Just how would people start thinking about this for
I think
themselves?
it really depends on your own interest. What do you enjoy doing? So you need to feel comfortable in that environment, because if you're not comfortable, that'll show when you're working with your clients. So make sure you're comfortable with your client, within that environment, and then you can reassure your clients as well. And it's about having that. Sometimes it's about having that discussion. So if you are going to be doing a big hill walk, you need to make sure that your client is prepared for that. It's so and prepared mentally and physically, and having the right clothing. So again, I'm one of the fan of the saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothing. So if you're prepared, it doesn't matter if it's raining actually. If you've got good waterproofs on, as long as you're warm and dry inside those waterproofs, you can still get a lot from that experience. It just brings a different dimension to it. But having a conversation with your client around what is it that they're expecting from it, and how do they feel about going into the outdoors as well. And when I do my sort of walks, my coaching walks and things, I will use a place that I'm familiar with. Or if I'm creating one of my wonder walks or doing my clarity immersion, which is my sort of more of the coaching type walks, I always recce the route first. Even if I've done it before, I will still do it a couple of times, or I'll do it before, a couple of weeks in advance of that actual walk, because things change in the environment. If it's been raining, it might be really muddy, and actually now it's not appropriate to go on that particular route. Or it might be that there's cows in the field, and if people don't like cows, then I might want to avoid that. So I always walk the route, a week in advance, wherever it is that I'm going. So I'm familiar with that, and I can tell people a little bit about what to expect and things. And what I often find is I will walk a route and then think, oh, actually, this would be better if I did it the other way around. So I like to get a feel for the walk as well. And it might be because it's uphill in one section, or perhaps you get a better view in a different direction or whatever. So it's funny, because I think, sometimes people have asked, why would I want to come on a walk with you when I can go for a walk myself? Which is a very good question, a valid question. But I put effort into, it's not just a case that I'm going to take you for a walk. I've recce'd the route, I've walked it, and I've thought about which direction to go in is the best way, and think, where can we sit and stop? Where are we going to be getting some shelter? So there's actually a lot of, there's a lot of work that goes into planning these walks. It's not just, oh, let's go and wing it. I've done some planning, and I've thought about it, and I've decided on the route for specific reasons. So whether there's a toilet spot somewhere, or there's a cafe at the start or the end, or whatever. So there is a lot of thought that goes into them. I don't just, say, oh, let's go for a walk around the park or whatever. Not unless it's somewhere that I'm very familiar with. There's always a reason why I've done it in a particular way on those walks and stuff. So I think about the type of walks that you want to do, and if you're doing a particularly hard walk, that will change the dynamics of the coaching session. And that's not to say it's better or worse. It's just being aware that that will be different. If you're physically challenging someone, then that becomes sort of the main focus for that person, rather than the coaching, potentially. So I think, again, think about what do you want the person to get out of it, and maybe having a discussion with your client is, what do they want from it? Is this an opportunity to, test their fitness and their resilience? Or is it an opportunity where they want to actually just find some peace so that they can ponder and think through things? So depending on what the client wants out of it will help you decide what type of walk you want to take them on as well. So there's definitely a few things to think about when you're doing some coaching walks. Yeah.
That's incredibly helpful. I'm really pleased I asked you, because and especially when you said about sort of doing the recce beforehand, I don't think that would have sort of come into my head had I not thought about it. But actually, as a local meetup, there's some walks, and when we go on the walks, a lot of the people who leave the walks, it's a regular walk they do. So they're not just picking some random walk. They literally have done that, maybe taken their dogs along, and they've probably done that same walk 100 times. And, when I go along and I sometimes think, how do they know which path to go down? But I mean, the dog knows as well, because they're probably always going that way. So that sort of preparation, that sort of insight of that behind the scenes, I think is really useful. And the other sort of thing I wanted to ask you about is almost a bit more philosophical, which is that, and this may depend on the person, on the coaching client, but how much do you think how much is the conversation that you had led by the natural environment? So I think you understand what I mean, but just to make sure I'm being clear for the listener, in terms of, it could be that somebody thinks, I've got this knotty problem. I want Rebecca to be my coach. I want to go on a walk because I also function better as I'm moving and it helps me to think about it. And by the end of it, I want to have developed my thinking, with reference to this problem. Versus it could be that because you thought of a sort of curated experience, for example, when a person sees a beautiful view, it might expand their mind and they go off in different directions. Like, how much can you predict how things are going to go versus how much is emergent, I suppose, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And again, it varies. So some of the walks, if it's a one-to-one coaching walk, that's generally led by the client. And if there's an opportune moment where something crops up and the environment lends itself, then I will bring that in. So again, it's sort of, and this is the good reason. This is a good reason for doing the recce, because you're aware of what's coming up. So you might think, oh, actually, if we just go a little bit further, I know there's a wonderful view here, and I think that's a really great metaphor for X, Y, Z, or whatever. So by recceing the walk, you know what's coming, and you can use that to your advantage. When I'm doing more of my group ones, again, I will curate that a little bit more. So I run a day retreat for women with another wonderful lady, and I lead the coach. We have a little coaching walk or guided walk in the afternoon, and we go on a particular route. So again, this is a tried and tested route. I've done it a number of times. And even though I've done it a number of times, like I said, I will still go out a couple of weeks beforehand, or at least a week beforehand, to check the route. Because, like I said, sometimes there's sheep in the field, sometimes there might be cows in the field, whatever. So I like to know in advance what we're going to come across and whether it's really muddy and what have you. But I know there's certain points on that walk where I will stop people to look at things from a different perspective. So we go up this gradual incline to get to the top of a ridge, and there's an amazing view over the village and over the surrounding hills. So for me, at that point, I always encourage people to, we talk about perspective in terms of, if you're stuck in a problem or a situation, so if you're, say, for example, you're in the village, it's very difficult to see the bigger picture. You've got these houses up around you, or these farms, or whatever it is, these buildings, so it's quite difficult to see the bigger picture. Now we've got some distance from that, we can see the bigger picture. We can see, oh, actually, there's a road that leads out of the village that way. Or we can see that, oh, that links to that. So we can see it from a different perspective. So for me, it helps people to visualize their problems and it just puts a different metaphor on it. So I have that as a stopping point on the walk, because I get people to think about, how can you see things differently? By looking from above, by putting some distance behind you, by seeing the bigger picture. And when we go around, so we sort of go over this ridge, drop down, cross over, and we go the other side, I'll then encourage them to stop and look back at where they've been, because they can see the hillside where we've been. So we can talk about, well, how did you get there, and looking back at where you've come from and seeing how we've progressed and things. So for me, there's so many metaphors within the outdoors. So that's quite a curated walk. And I think it was the year before last, again, I probably had this idea while I was out walking or jogging. And I suddenly thought, you know what, I could have these themed walks. So last year I did try it, and it might, the one's called the Wisdom of Trees. So even in my local park, there are so many different types of trees of all shapes and sizes. And for me, that's such a metaphor for life. We're all different. We're all unique. How they bend in a particular way, and the way the branches are and things like that, and the fact that they drop their leaves. So the whole walk is sort of curated around how we can use trees as a metaphor for life and take wisdom from them. And then another one that I had an idea for, because on the way up to my local park, you walk past a cemetery. And again, when I've been listening to somebody else that I've been following for a long time, he talks about the waste of talent when people go to their grave and haven't reached their potential and stuff. And what was that one called? Lessons from a Cemetery or something like that, I think it is. Life Lessons from a Cemetery, which sounds a bit morbid, that we go around a cemetery, but there are so many things that you can tap into. So I did run that walk last year because I was umming and ahhing and I thought, how will this land with people? But I had a couple of people come on it and we had such lovely conversations around, what we see in a cemetery in terms of, again, we have no idea how long the path is in life, and death doesn't, it's not choosy. It'll take us all at some point, but we don't decide when that's going to be, So again, there were so many metaphors and just encouraging people to enjoy life while you're here, because we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know how long we've got and things. So actually it stimulates conversation in different ways by using the environment. So yeah, I walk in random place.
Hi everybody, I'm Robbie, I'm the creator and founder of The Coach's Journey, and I've just got one quick thing before we get back to the show. As part of our commitment to keeping episodes like this free so we can support you and coaches like you, we'd like to ask something of you. Wherever you're listening to this show, please click subscribe or follow for The Coach's Journey. That's a free way of supporting the show and helping us continue to support you and other coaches. Thanks in advance for subscribing or following, and if you want to hear about other ways to support The Coach's Journey, then listen all the way to the end of this episode or visit www.thecoachesjourney.com.
Terrific. It's terrific. I'll just say how much I'm appreciating this conversation. I got a real tingle with, particularly when you were first talking about the village and the perspective and the road out of there. It reminds me, I particularly like horror films, and it's just almost that thing where it's when in a horror film, people can be trapped in a particular space and then the camera will zoom out and it was actually not a small space, or there was a way out, or so it was a small space, or there was an easy way out or something. And it's being able to give people that insight, but also when you said and then you can look back and see it from yet another perspective. There's so many layers to it. You could take them into the village and say, now these buildings look big. I can just imagine you doing that. And
yeah, I love doing it. I mean, and the more I do this, the longer I do this, the more I can tap into it even more. And I think it's partly with getting a bit older, but partly just the experience of different things as well, and so that's my intention again this year, is I will be running. So I call them Wonder Walks. So during May, May is National Walking Month. So I tend to put on a series of walks during May, and I'll have these different themed walks. So they're not particularly long, they're not particularly strenuous. So again, I like to make them accessible for people, but it's about stimulating that conversation and stimulating thoughts and getting you to think about things from a different perspective. So I love doing that, and it's opening up places that people perhaps wouldn't necessarily think about going to themselves. So yeah, I will be doing that again in May.
It's amazing. And just to mention again to the listeners that whenever a guest mentions particular links, we'll try to put them in the show notes. So we'll try to link to that week, because I was thinking earlier about how, I don't know how sort of far this analogy will stretch, but when we were talking about Sheffield and how perhaps if you grow up here, or like me, you've now been here a little while, it's easy to almost get blasé about the access to nature and green spaces we have, and then you go somewhere else and that may not be the case. And I was wondering whether there was some sort of parallel for you coaching that you combine, which is that if a person hasn't had a coaching conversation of any description, the beauty of them being in that limitless space of opportunity for their mind to wander into, I wonder if it has, some parallels with people who don't normally get to be in nature, or, people when they see the sea for the first time or something like that, having grown up near the sea. That's hard to imagine for me because I was spoilt with that. But I wonder whether the combination of those two things, so basically putting people into a natural space which is rich and alive with purpose and beauty, and at the same time holding them in that coaching conversation and being with them on the way,
Yeah.
does the interplay work between those things, and is that motivating for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing that I talk about is part of the reason for getting outdoors is it's literally more space around you. And I'm a very much big believer in energy. And if you're in an office or a room, especially if it hasn't got any windows, which a lot of offices don't, not all offices have windows and things, then we don't see the daylight, and we literally don't have the physical space around us. My belief, and from personal experience, when I have physical space around me in the outdoors, it's more space for my thoughts to come and go and for things to ponder. If I'm in an enclosed room with four walls, it's almost restricting my energy and restricting those thoughts and stuff. So I genuinely believe that there's something in the environment that you're in. So, obviously it depends where people are. If I've coached people abroad and I've coached people at the other end of the country and stuff, so we can't do the outdoor side of things. But locally, I will always offer that as an option to do a coaching walk, and I encourage people to come out and do something together because it lends itself. Even if we're just sat outside, if they don't want the walk, even if we're just sat outside somewhere, then it just creates a different energy. And I just think it helps the coaching process when you've literally got that space around you and you've got fresh air. It does help to blow away those cobwebs. It helps to blow away any staleness in our thinking and what have you when we've got some fresh air that's circulating around us as well. So I'm a big advocate of just getting outside and thinking outside. You can do this yourself. Go and sit in your garden, and do some thinking outside and notice the difference to sitting in a little office. I'm sure that everybody would notice something different.
Yeah, and I was thinking, in the same way that I remember watching a program about some children who were being taken away on holiday and they didn't normally get to travel, and they'd never seen a cow before. I think they saw it from a train or something. Again, for me, it's one of those moments where I was like, wow, imagine never having seen a cow. And these weren't really, really little children. And so I was just feeling inspired at the idea that, like, through your work and everything you're going to do in the future, that you're introducing these people to a sense of possibility, and I was thinking actually how it would be amazing if you could do some of this with younger people now, because you're involved in the Girl Guides, etc. You do have the opportunity to perhaps to do that. But I think when a lot of young people don't have access to the natural environment, it's a shame. And when people don't have access to coaching or don't realize the potential of a coaching conversation, that's also a shame. And I wonder where, as the sort of conversation moves on, the sort of national and international conversation about the importance of nature for humans' well-being and just for the world, and the importance of coaching, and it's becoming more and more of a normal, using air quotes again, thing. It's like a lot of people haven't had access to these things, which if they did have, they might enjoy and get a great deal out of.
Yeah, I get, I see your point there a little bit more as well, in terms of if people aren't used to being outdoors, then it's a completely different environment, and there's so much for your senses. I think that's the other thing. I encourage people to use all their senses when they're outdoors, and I often encourage people to start with a bit of a grounding exercise. So something that I just call the countdown to calm. I'm sure it's got other names as well, but it's tapping into your senses. So it's 5 things that you can see. So looking around you and actually noticing what you're seeing, but zoning in on something quite small and specific. So it might be the way that the leaves are blowing in the wind or whatever. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, and that encourages you to really tap into listening, because often we get used to tuning out or zoning out of certain noises so that we can focus, or so actually when you start listening deeply, you might notice more things in the background, or you pick up on the bird singing or an aeroplane going above or distant traffic or whatever it is, but really encouraging you to tap into your environment. Then it's 3 things that you can feel. So it might be sort of the warmth of the sun, or the rain on your skin, or the wind, or whatever it might be. It might be the sensation of material on your skin, or it might be that your heart's beating a little bit faster. So it could be internal feelings or it could be external feelings. It doesn't matter, but tapping into that sense of touch or feel. 2 things that you can smell. So again, just encouraging you to notice what you can smell and maybe taking a few deeper breaths. And then the last one is, what can you taste? And it might not be anything, or maybe you've just had a cup of coffee out your flask, or you've had a mint, or whatever it is, but are you aware of any sort of taste in your mouth? So it's a really helpful exercise to ground you in the environment that you're in, but also it gets you to just tune in and notice things a little bit more as well. So it's a really useful exercise to do if your thoughts are sort of spinning and and you're feeling a bit anxious. It can just actually help to ground you. And it's an exercise that you can do indoors or outdoors, and it works wherever. You don't even have to make it obvious what you're doing, but it's a lovely exercise to do. But I particularly like getting clients to do that when we go outside. Is one of the earlier things that we'll do with that sort of exercise, just to get them present in the moment and connect with their surroundings. And I think that's part of the joy of being outdoors, is learning to take notice. I think we get so used to being very hyper focused on things, or in our heads even, that we miss out on so much that's around us. And that's one thing that I have learned to do, partly through my Mountain Leader Award and other things, is being much more of my surroundings. You learn to look for the little yellow arrows across the other side of the field when you're doing your map reading and stuff. So I'm picking up, I'm aware. It's like, oh, we've just been, even if it's just in my head, we've been through a gate there. Oh, we've just crossed over a stream. So I'm picking up and I'm aware of my surroundings, because I have to be aware for when I'm map reading and things. I need to know where I am. So I need to be sort of following that route in my head, as well as just being, so it encourages me to take more notice of my surroundings as well.
So helpful. And just I'm gonna ask you about a different topic in a minute, but just while we're here, and I love your articulation of, I love that exercise, and I love the fact that you were saying that you can do it inside too, because I was thinking that you could do it over an online call or on the end of a telephone or something. But one thing I was going to ask you is, so which relates to the fact that I said that our local meetups, you're often called on to do the mindful moment, and part of that is because sometimes we have guest speakers. Sometimes a guest speaker does that. Sometimes a guest speaker doesn't want to, or weren't prepared, or it's not really their bag. And for me, I'd say I still experience resistance to that. Not resistance to participating, resistance to doing that myself with a client, or even in that environment. And I went out of my comfort zone, and I tried it when I spoke at the local meetup and what have you, which made me laugh actually, because I did it and I thought, I'd made my voice sound reasonably calm or something. And afterwards, someone said to me, I really like that. You just said it in a normal voice. And I thought I made a great effort to make my voice sound a bit more like a Buddhist monk or something. But they said they appreciated that I just used my normal voice, which made me laugh. Have you always, as far back as you can remember, been comfortable with that side of things? The sort of more like meditation and breathing and doing that with clients? Is it something you've experimented with and become more comfortable with over time? Like how does that work for you?
That's a really good point. I suppose a couple of things. I'm quite comfortable in speaking in front of groups and things. I love the training side of things, so I'm quite comfortable speaking in front of groups and what have you. And that's something that I had to work on. It didn't come naturally to me in some respects. I used to hate making telephone calls as a youngster and into my early teenager, because people couldn't understand me sometimes. Either I'd be mumbling my words somehow, or my accent, or whatever. And so I used to hate making phone calls. I thought, I just dreaded it. So I suppose this might have been about around the same sort of time or slightly before. I actually got myself some elocution lessons, just a couple. And a lady taught me how to pronounce things differently. And I've got quite a broad Yorkshire accent, and I'm proud of that. But it's nothing to do with that.
Greatest accents in the world.
Exactly, I love the Yorkshire accent. So I learned a little bit more about how to pronounce letters and things. So I would always been into sort of developing myself. If I knew there was something that I wasn't particularly good at or strong at, then I always wanted to try and work on that. So, but I guess I gained confidence in standing up in front of groups and stuff, and I did a bit of teaching for a little while. as well, and training and things. And I suppose I've listened to quite a lot of meditations and what have you. So I don't have any sort of formal training in the meditations, but I've listened to lots. I've listened to other people do them who I know and things. And I know what I like. So I make an assumption that other people will like it as well, or that it will help other people, which is not necessarily the best way of doing things. But I sort of learned the ideas behind it and what I wanted to get across to people, and just slowing down your voice, because sometimes when you hear people who's perhaps not as experienced, they often rush through it, and it's almost like, oh, I need to get this over and done with, or oh, this feels like a long time, and therefore it must feel a long time to that person. Where when you're in it and you're listening to it, you think, gosh, I wish they'd slow down, because it feels very rushed. So it's quite a different experience being on the other side of it. So I think if it's something you're wanting to develop, is to experience it from both sides. So when you're reading something out, or you're talking through an exercise with somebody, it can feel like it's a long time, but for the person in it, when they're relaxing into it, it goes by much quicker for them. So I think being aware of that can be quite helpful as well. And just knowing, and again, you'll have experienced this when I have done the mindful moment, I always relate it to some sort of outdoory type thing, whether it's by the beach or the field or whatever, because I find that a calming environment to be in. So I want to use that and help people experience that for themselves as well. So it's just through practice, and it is practice. Again, like you said, the first few times I did it, it probably did feel a little bit awkward. I'm thinking, oh, is that a long gap for people there, or do I need to do this a bit slower? Do I need to do it a little bit faster? So it is a bit of trial and error with it, and just playing around with it. So certainly when I started out, I've created a number of different scripts to use for different purposes and different things that I maybe wanted to focus on. And I still use them to some extent. But because I've done quite a few, I feel more confident being able to do it off the top of my head now. I don't have to use a script. I do feel more comfortable just doing it off the top of my head. But that's only through trial and error, like I say, and experience of being on both sides of the fence, as it were.
It's really helpful. Yeah, no, that's definitely very helpful for me, especially your point about how you experience it on the other side, because I've certainly had occasions when, I thought, oh, it's a bit of a shame that ended, because I was enjoying that. I was in the moment, and the person had successfully enough painted the picture of where we were and what have you, but I was enjoying being there for a bit. But from the other perspective, I'm thinking, people want to get on with this. I need to speed it up. But on a related point, I think that one of the things that seems to me to have been a theme in our conversation so far today is that it feels like you have a real growth mindset around, I know you have a broad interest in personal development anyway, but you seem to have a mindset that if you're not so good at something, or if you don't know about something, you are able to go and find out about it. Is that a hard-won prize? Is that, I mean, it feels like you've done it for a while, because you were saying about going and speaking to all those, physios, and that was around like university age. So is that something you've always had, do you think, that ability to sort of say, well, I don't know about this, can I find out more? Or how did that develop?
That's a very good question. I suppose looking back, I probably have done it for a long time, and that's maybe why I've been in and out of education so many times. I've been to different courses and night schools and what have you to do things, because I think there's always room for learning more and improving more. And not on an egotistical level. A lot of this is for my own benefit, and through developing myself, I then hope I can share that with my clients or other people and friends and family and things. And yes, I think it is that growth mindset around, if I can see that something's holding me back or is not helping me, then I want to change that, because I know I can. I think sometimes people get stuck feeling, well, it's just me, I'm not good with numbers, and sort of accept that. And it's like, for me, it's like, no, I'm not accepting that. I know I can get better if I put the effort in, or if I make, take the opportunity to learn more about it and something. So yeah, it is something that I am quite passionate about. If I see an opportunity to improve and develop on something, then I will. And I think it's about doing that for the right reason. So when we were chatting before, I mentioned that I'm doing, again, another course, a coaching program at the minute for myself as a participant, by guy called Peter Sage, and he talks about, let me get this right. You don't want to be chasing the rabbit of fulfillment on the track of achievement. So about, we can often get caught up in saying, oh, well, when I've done this course, then I'll feel more confident to do X, Y, Z. Or if I just get this qualification or I just get this piece of paper, then I'll be able to X, Y, Z. We can sometimes get caught up in this. And I think coaches, especially when they're starting out, they think, oh, well, when I've coached a couple more people, then I'll start charging or I'll start my own business. You have to do it first to grow. You have to take the action first before you see the results. And gaining another piece of paper will not necessarily or automatically give you the confidence to go and do whatever you think it's going to give you to do. And I can sort of see that pattern in myself. I did a lot of training. So I mentioned briefly that I'd did some teaching, because that was one of the other things I dabbled in for a little while. I decided I would go back and train as a teacher, not in a school. It was a PGCE in lifelong learning. It was 16 plus, and I thought, yeah, that'll be the thing that makes me feel fulfilled. So I did 2 years studying a PGCE, and I did a bit of teaching in a couple of colleges, completely different subjects actually, and I enjoyed it to a degree, but it wasn't me. I'm not somebody who can be stuck in a classroom and follow rigid guidelines and but I did it just wasn't me. But the learning, the actual learning of the principles around teaching and reflection and stuff was invaluable. And again, I met some wonderful people. So I never see any of the things that I do as wasted. I think sometimes people feel a bit like, oh God, I can't believe I just spent 2 years doing that and then actually I've not used it or I don't like it or whatever. I don't see it like that. I see it as it's just part of my journey, and it's, it's another string to my bow, as my mum will say. But I think what I learned at some point when I was doing my coaching is I have slowed down in terms of doing more courses. I do still do them because I enjoy them, but I don't do them with the aim of thinking, well, this will make me feel fulfilled. Now, I do it because it's to either improve a particular skill or because I can see a gap in what I'm doing, or it will help. So not because I think that's going to be the answer to whatever it is that I'm looking for. Because I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking, oh, well, when this happens, I'll be happy. And interestingly, I've just been writing about this recently in a blog or in my newsletter, and saying, why do we wait? We wait for so many external factors before we're happy. Why wait? Why not feel happy now? Why not enjoy life now? Rather than waiting for that new partner, that new job, or gaining that qualification or whatever, because there's no guarantee that we'll feel any differently once we've got it. I think this is the thing, people expect to feel different. And if you can't access this feeling now, there's certainly no guarantee that you can expect it when you've done it either, or found what it is you think you're looking for on that. So yes, I can't remember what the question was now, but I hope that answered it.
No. It was to be perfectly frank. I can't remember what the question was either, because what I was really thinking of is the fact that at first I thought you were saying, well, you were saying how coaches can keep on getting essentially more bits of paper, and then I was thinking, but you've done so many different things which have contributed to the whole you. But then you then sort of preempted my question, because going back to what Peter Sage says, you explained that you might do a number of different things, but the reason for you doing them is different. As in, you enjoy the thing for itself. And that's perhaps it, is that I think a lot of time human beings, self-included, can think of different things as steps on the road, on like a higher road, rather than we just enjoy them in and of itself. So I can give an example right now, which is, we're recording this podcast and I'm thinking, oh, I really want it to be useful for the people listening, and I already think there's so many things that are useful for them. And at the same time, I'm thinking about all the timing. I've got to keep the timing right, and I've got things to ask you and what have you. And part of my brain saying that, and part of my brain is just saying, just enjoy the conversation, which I'm also doing, and the battle being won by that side. But I think that often as humans, we can think of it as, if we do this thing, then the outcome we'll enjoy that once we get there. And certainly as I get older, the more that I enjoy things along the way, in the moment or in this day or this week, I just appreciate life a lot more, I think.
Yeah. And you mentioned such a good point there as well. It is about enjoying the journey of things. And again, this is another thing that Peter Sage will reiterate a lot, and something that we've just been covering in a recent module is the purpose of a goal is not necessarily achieving it, but to see who we need to become to achieve it. So what I know, I just love that. I think, wow, and he talked about that if you set a goal and you already know how you're going to achieve it, then it's not big enough. A goal should stretch you, and it's not necessarily about achieving it. But if you set a big ambitious goal, you have to change your mindset around things. You have to do things differently. And that's the purpose of it, is what do you need to do in order to become the person who's more likely to get nearer to that goal or to achieve it. It's about enjoying the journey, enjoying that process of developing and maybe changing your habits and the way you do things. And the likelihood is you will experience huge benefits, regardless of whether you achieve the goal or not. You will experience so many benefits from doing that. And for me, that really resonates with me, because I have to say, I'm one of those coaches. A lot of coaches will talk about goals and make them smart and things like that. And they have their place, but I'm also one of these who I tend to refer to them when I've been talking to people around process goals, in terms of what habits do you need to develop to become the person you want to become, or lead the lifestyle that you want. So they're not necessarily a very specific outcome as such, but it's the steps to get to that outcome. So by putting the right habits in place, you will naturally get what you want. So rather than just saying, I want to lose weight, you might think about, actually, I want to change my eating habits. I want to eat more healthily. And therefore, you will naturally lose weight by adopting those habits and things, if that makes sense. So I'm much more around the creating the right habits and adjusting your lifestyle to get the outcome you want, rather than just aiming for some very specific goal.
That's really good. And also, I imagine, continuing that example of the losing weight, which is that, there'll be other side effects. So, for example, if I'm eating nutritious food, even if for some reason I didn't lose weight because, I don't know, I never exercised or I had some other unhealthy behaviors, at least the nutritional value of the food being up would be doing good things for my body anyway. So it's like you're getting all this positivity along the way, rather than it's just, if I reach my goal, it's a good thing, and weight, I would, seems to me like one of those things. Whenever I've wanted to lose weight, it's like, if I get there, I've done well, but if I get there, I haven't done very well, because you have a target. Whereas actually the whole process of, when I was losing weight, I went and walked more, for example, was good for my mental health and good for my body, and it's just, there's so many other parts to it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because you get so many more benefits.
Yeah.
Because it gets you to think about things in a different way. Because sometimes what happens is people set a goal, say maybe they want to lose weight because they want to fit in their wedding dress, or they want to do whatever, which is a very specific thing, which is good. But then sometimes what can happen is they've lost the weight so they can fit in the wedding dress, and then all those things that they did go out the window, and they go back to their old habits and they put the weight back on. Then you've sort of missed the point to some extent. There is actually, if you say, I want to lead a healthier lifestyle, you change your lifestyle around, you will naturally lose the weight, but you've also made a long-term gain in that. And I'm all for that. And that's a big sort of premise of my coaching, is I want to help people transform, not to just gain, not just to achieve a goal or accomplish something. I wanted to help them to make life-changing, long-term, habits and changes. I'm a big believer in the power of habits, and actually, if we get those right, then we naturally get to where we want to be anyway. So tap into that feeling. What is it that you want to feel as an outcome? What is it that you want to experience? And then think about, right, what do I need to do to get to that point? And I just find that that's a much more sustainable, because if we make these changes, and this is why I don't believe in New Year's resolutions anymore and what have you, because I think people tend to be over ambitious, say, well, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, I'm going to cut out all sugar, I'm not going to drink anymore, and blah blah. No wonder they fail, and can't keep it up because there's too many big things going on and they haven't got a clear reason for wanting to do that as well. So you need to also identify the purpose behind that. Why do you want to lose the weight? Or why do you want to become more healthy? Is it because you've had a health scare? Is it because you want to keep up with your kids? Is it because whatever it is, find the bigger reason you want to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And that's going to keep you going. Because personal development and personal growth is hard. I think that's the other thing that I've learned over the years. It's uncomfortable and it's hard work. And if you ain't got a big enough reason to keep going, you ain't going to keep going because there's getting to a point where you think, God, why am I doing this? And it's not enjoyable at some points, but you keep going through that. I remember somebody telling me and explaining life coaching in terms of you end up sort of dismantling yourself almost and the habits and things and really reflecting and possibly feeling quite negative about things. So you have to keep going because then you put yourself back together again with the proper things in place, with really solid foundations in a much stronger position. So it is uncomfortable at times. So I did my Starter for 10 program earlier this year. I always run it in January. So rather than New Year's resolutions, I encourage people to do Starter for 10. And this was the 7th time I've run it. And when I looked back through my records, I thought, wow, I've done this 7 times. I was dead chuffed that I'd got to that point. And it's something that I've learned over the years. I now do sort of a welcome video and I encourage people to think about it in terms of a different thing. And I warn people, say, look, this will be uncomfortable at times. You will do some of these exercises and you'll look at them and you think, oh, that's uncomfortable. I don't really want to admit that, but keep going because you will feel better having done it, and this is going to help set you up for the future by addressing these things now, and it's a safe space to do that. You don't have to share with anybody. You can share it with me if you want to or whatever. But I do warn people that sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's hard work, but it's definitely worth it.
I think it's a brilliant idea of the sort of almost breaking down the different parts of you to sort of then build yourself back up. And it's also a reminder that almost sort of coaching is for life, not just for Christmas. You can't really just have one bit of coaching and you're like, oh, I'm fixed now, or one bit of therapy or whatever that might be for people. And it's an ongoing process. And, we are constantly changing all the time. Anyway, even if it's not, a conscious thing. And so that kind of check in with yourself and that doing the work, to keep things going and hopefully come out of it feeling a better person, whatever that definition is for each of us, and a more fulfilled person perhaps. And I wanted to, at some point I would like to broaden this out into, there's a particular non-coaching thing that I want to talk to you about, which you mentioned our one-to-one, which I really want to talk to you about for the listeners. But in terms of your coaching practice, I'd love to learn a little bit more about, how you built it up and how you found clients, going back to after doing your training, how did that process work and where's it got to now? What does that look like?
Yeah, and again, this is it's quite a challenge if you're not used to being in business or not used to sort of selling your services. It is hard, and I remember being on that taster coaching weekend and talking about charging sort of £50 an hour. I'm thinking, I can't charge £50 an hour. £50 an hour, that's a lot of money, isn't it? So getting my head around the fees was a huge thing for me. And so when I first started out, I asked one of my friends if she would be interested in having some coaching sessions. They don't always recommend coaching family and friends, particularly because it can be too too stressful and cause too many. It can be a little bit. It's not necessarily appropriate, shall we? So we'll leave it at that. But one of my friends, she's into personal development stuff herself and read books and things. So I thought actually this would be really good. And I knew she would be really understanding if I messed up a little bit or whatever. She would be very sort of understanding and non-judgmental with that. So I started doing some sessions with her for free just to build up my confidence. And I approached another couple of people and I offered to do some free sessions with them. So as part of my training, I had to do sessions anyway, so they were all sort of free. So that had helped to build up my confidence a little bit within what I was doing. But then I worked with other people after that. And what really boosted my confidence, I'd done some coaching sessions with a lady. I think I'd done 6 for free. I'd done them, as, she knew that I was doing my training and had just sort of qualified. And at the end of the 6, she said, "I'd like to continue working with you and I want to pay you." And it's like, wow, that was such a wonderful compliment, because she had found it genuinely useful. I think that's the thing. When you start to recognize the value you're adding to somebody else's lives, it gives you the confidence to know what you're doing works. And that definitely helped to boost my confidence. So from there, I did start putting some fees on my time. I can't remember how much I charged originally. And again, I've played around with the model that I use for that in terms of fees and things. So when I first started out, I did offer sort of one-off sessions or pay session by session. But you do soon learn, and as you mentioned before, it's not a quick fix. It's not a one session and that's it. You've sorted whatever it is. So I don't offer one-off sessions now, not unless I've already worked with the person that perhaps want a top up and stuff. But now it is a series of sessions that I offer with people, and 6 seems to be a standard amount for whatever reason. Often in therapy type sessions or other things, it's often 6. So 6 seemed a good amount. So I'll either work with people for 6 sessions or 8 sessions, and there's a bit more around that. And I gradually adjusted my packages slightly and things and developed that based on experience of working with clients and also my own personal development and maybe my own learning and things like that as well. So I've adjusted them. At one point, I had 3 packages, because again, you can go on all these different courses and workshops about how to set up your business. And some people would say 3 packages are ideal because most people go for the middle package.
Yeah, like wine on a restaurant list, I've
Yeah.
heard. You have a really
Exactly.
expensive, you have a house wine. You're like, no, I'm a connoisseur. I'll have the one that's £1 more than a house wine or something.
Yeah. So that was sort of the theory behind it. But actually, what I found was then it became a bit confusing for people. Well, what's the difference between this one, and this one? And sometimes having too much choice is no good either. So now it's two choices that they get. I'm always flexible around that. That they're not set in stone, but I think two sort of frameworks for people is much easier to choose between. So again, I've narrowed it down to 2 packages, and like I say, I've played around with this sort of how I do that over the years, and it will continue to change, no doubt. I'm comfortable with what it is at the minute. I advertise through the Life Coach Directory, so I've subscribed to them for quite a few years actually, and I find that a good service. I know people have mixed results with it, but for me, I only need 1 or 2 clients a year, and that covers my yearly subscription. And I was just telling somebody about this the other day. There are other benefits as well. So I am listed on there. You get quite a decent profile that you can adjust a lot of it. You can tailor your profile a lot on there and put quite a lot of the things that you do. But you can also advertise any workshops or events that you do. There's a way of promoting those through there. They have networking opportunities as well, online networking opportunities, and they've got a good support team as well. If you want some help with your profiles or whatever, you have the opportunity to submit blogs to them as well, and they will promote that on social media. So I found them a good way of promoting my services. And again, it tends to come in waves. So I'll have a few weeks where I get lots of inquiries, and not all of them will lead everywhere. Again, being transparent about this, not everybody even shows up to the discovery calls, which is incredibly frustrating. Sometimes they'll book and then they just don't show up and they ghost you, which is, quite disheartening. And then other times it'll be quiet. But like I say, I only need a couple of clients to more than cover the subscription that I pay for that. And I have a website, so people can book directly through my website. So I felt very professional. This was a couple of years ago when I linked with Calendly and people could book a slot on Calendly. I'm like, oh, look, people can book now a free discovery call through Calendly. So they can do that directly through my website. And again, you go on the little business workshops and stuff, and somebody said, why don't you have it on your email signature as well as a link on that? I thought, that's a good idea. I don't think anybody's ever used it, but why not promote it in as many places as you can?
And you got it on LinkedIn as well. When I saw your LinkedIn profile, there was a bit with a discovery call. there was, I don't know, I didn't click on the link, but is there something from your LinkedIn as well which might take people? I feel like
there may
there was
well
something.
be. I think there might be on
I was
there.
very impressed with it. It doesn't sound like it's a critical component of your business, but
No, but I think the more you put it out there, the wider the audience you can attract. And what I have done a couple of times recently, this is a new tactic that I've got, is on LinkedIn. You know, you'll get an email saying request for whatever it is. I think you can say somebody's requesting life coaching or somebody's requesting leadership development, depending on what you put on your profile. I'd seen that, and it's probably a sneaky way of doing it in some respects. It's probably not what LinkedIn particularly like you to do, because it's sort of a premium feature. Is they'll tell you when you click on it, you need to be a premium person to reply to this. But what I did, I thought, oh, well, I looked what the person was looking for, and I thought, well, I can help them. You know, I was genuinely thinking they would be somebody I would enjoy working with. I searched them up on their profile, and then I just messaged them and said, I've seen that you're looking for a life coach. Take a look at my profile. If you're interested, here's my booking link to book a discovery call. So nothing pushy, just reaching out and saying I've seen their request. And 2 people have got back to me through doing that method. And one I'm working with at the moment, they are a current client, and I've got a discovery call next week based on doing that approach. But again, I think it's important not to be pushy. I'm not one of these people who is pushy. And if you're just starting out on this, don't be desperate. You know, try and lower the importance of getting a client. I know that might seem sort of a bit counterintuitive to some extent, but if you come across as needing a client, that will come across in that call with that person, and it will put you off, you know, or it will put the person off. So just be genuine and genuinely think, how can you help that person? You are there to serve your clients, you know, so try and put yourself in their shoes rather than in your shoes. If you can lower the importance of gaining that client, you will come across and develop a much better experience for both people. Because that's the other thing you learn as well, is not all clients are ideal clients. You know, there've been 1 or 2 clients that I've worked with that I thought, or had discovery calls with, that have not been ideal clients, and that's really helpful. You know, these experiences are just as powerful experience of working with somebody that you do really enjoy, because you learn who because you have to enjoy it. I think that's the other thing to remind people, is you do this because you enjoy working with people, and if it's not your client, then don't be afraid of saying, actually, I don't think I'm the coach for you, you know. And so I think developing a network of other coaches is really helpful, because then you can signpost people to other coaches if you don't think you're the right. And being very open with people is key as well. You know, I'm always very clear, and I don't think I am the right person, or I think that perhaps they would benefit from more counselling type things. I will always make that clear, because ultimately it serves me. The person is much more likely to come back to me in future if I'm honest with them and open with them in the first place, you know. And again, some people will come back to you maybe a few months down the line, maybe a year down the line. If you've had a good interaction with them, then you build up that trust with them. So it's often a slow burn with coaching.
As all of the things you mentioned are really, really, really helpful. And one of the things I admire about the way that you sort of you share what you do with the world is that, a bit like you were saying with those different ways for people to book a discovery call with you, is that, you know, I'm on your email list, for example, so I see that. I like the things that you put on LinkedIn. I like the fact that if you go to your website, you have a shop with a range of different products. These are separate to the packages. These are, you know, like, so it might be an opportune time to talk about that you've both written a book, and you've written a book recently, but you've also written a book in the past. Is that correct? Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yes, so I am very excited, actually. So you'll be one of the first here. So I have booked my launch party. Woo! Very excited. So I've booked the date of that this morning. And that will be what I call a proper book in those quotation marks. It will be it will be a printed version. There will be an ebook available as well, but it will be a printed copy of the book, full-size book. And I have done an ebook before. I was approached by Bookboon, which is a company, and this was through LinkedIn, because originally I thought it was one of these just pushy salespeople trying to sell me something or whatever. But I looked into it and I arranged a call with somebody, and they explained it. I thought, well, actually, it's quite a good opportunity. And this was during COVID, so it was perfect timing. They just said they look for people to write ebooks for them. So it's only ever an ebook. They have an online platform, an online shop. And they mainly write for professionals and students, is my understanding. So quite sort of practical type books and things. And they're much smaller. So between 8 to 12,000 words, I think, is their sort of limit. So they are much smaller, more accessible books. And they have different sort of topic areas, and they suggested topic areas and said, would you be able to write something on that? And I looked at them, yeah, I could write on a few of those topics, actually. So I had to submit them an outline of what I would write about and what the chapters might be about. And they were happy with that. So I was given the go-ahead to write it. So there were no costs involved. So this was a really useful thing. It was a really good experience. I wrote it. I had to proofread it and edit it and stuff. There was no editing done on that side of it. So I had to make sure that I had it done on my side with that and getting people to read through it for me. And then they do all the other bits of it. So they designed the cover to go with it. I had them saying that as well. They sort of sent me to a website and said, you can choose these images and blah, blah, blah. So it is a proper book. It's an ebook, but it's a smaller version and it's only available on their platform. So I still signpost people to that. So there was no upfront costs for me to be involved with that process, and every 6 months or so I get an email from them saying you've earned this much in royalties, which is amazing. So I'm always delighted. So I've got a paycheck coming from them at the end of February. It's not very much, but it all adds up, and the fact that it's earning money and I'm not doing anything for it, it's a bonus, So the book is called Balancing Act, Maintaining a Work-Life Balance While Working from Home, because obviously that was key at that point. Everybody was starting to work from home. So again, I talk about habits, setting up your work environment, making sure that you're staying connected, staying well, looking after your well-being, that sort of stuff. And I really enjoyed writing it, actually. I got into a good process. So I would sit down on a Saturday afternoon and spend a couple of hours writing a chapter. And then, gradually it grew. So that's the ebook that I've done. And then I was involved with another lady who was already quite experienced in writing books. So hers are more like workbooks. So that one is it's a self-love journal, 90-day workbook to improving the relationship with yourself or something along that line. So it is more of a sort of journal thing. So there isn't much sort of content in it as such. We both of us wrote a little bit for the introduction. I explained how it works and things like that, and then I had an input in terms of the affirmations. At the back there's over 120 affirmations in, I think, around sort of self-love and looking after yourself. And then it's a 90-day workbook, so each day there's a space for you to write in and choose an affirmation and things like that. So I have that as a physical copy that I can send to people, which I love. And then, so yes, my proper book, as it were, is called Rhythm, Practical Tools and Ideas for Creating Balance, Harmony and Fun. And Rhythm is an acronym, so it stands for relationships, habits, your purpose, time, health and mindset. And I believe through my experience and working with clients and things that I've learned over the years, these are all sort of foundational elements that make our life fulfilling. And if we can get the balance right of them, then again, it laterally leads to that feeling of enjoying life and having more fun and what have you. So it's quite a practical book in terms that there's a number of different exercises and tools for people to go through and some concepts to help people understand things, hopefully, as well. There's a couple of little diagram things in there. And I've really enjoyed doing it. So I started that last January. So I'm dead proud of myself because my aim was to have it done by the end of January this year. So technically I've done that. It's not printed yet, but it's not far off. And I've just set the launch date for the launch party this morning. So I'm happy that I've done that. But gosh, it's it's a learning curve. The writing of the book was the easy part. With all because I didn't do any of the other side of it before when I was writing the Balancing Act one. I've learned about typesetting, editing, printers, these are all different people that's been involved with this process of getting this book to this stage, and a graphic designer for the book cover and the internal graphics and things. So yeah, so I understand why you need an acknowledgements page now, because there's so many other people involved in writing the book when you get to this stage.
Well, congratulations about that, and I think it's another example. It's another example of your growth mindset, and it's also a lovely example how, when you're self-employed, when you're freelance, when you're doing these things, that you do have the opportunity to kind of dip into a lot of different areas, and that can be seen as a wonderful opportunity or too much of a challenge, and everyone will go at their own pace. But I think there's a really amazing experience there that you do get to learn about, in essence, other people's jobs and other people's specialisms, and to have, renewed respect for people who do their part of the process very well. That's fantastic. And I wanted to, you've told us a bit about your coaching, but there was a particular area that when we were talking one-to-one before that I was very keen to learn about. You were telling me about social prescribing. And I would love to learn, I'd love to learn a bit more about that and to share that with the listeners, because I feel it's a term that I've heard a little bit more. So I was in Sheffield, I was at an event, and the lady next to me was involved in social prescribing, but in Leeds. And so she said, I think she asked me, do I know what it was? And I said, oh, funnily enough, I've just been speaking to somebody who's explained to me about it. So people might have heard the term. Could you tell us a bit about it and what you do? And I just think it's a really interesting area.
Thank you. Yeah. So I do it part-time. So again, full transparency, I coach and I work as well. Do both. So social prescribing, sometimes we're known as link workers or community connectors. So they're all very, very similar in that. And I will often describe when I get a new referral through to clients as a bit like a navigation service, in terms of we will work closely with that person to find out a little bit about them, what their circumstances are, what they would like to improve or change, and then we help them find and access the right services, organisations or groups, depending on what it is that they want help with. So it is very, very broad ranging, and that's what I like about it, really. So it might be that somebody's been referred to us because they're lonely and isolated, or perhaps they're concerned about their health and want to improve their health, or perhaps they're having difficulty with their housing or money. So it can be hugely anything really. And the idea originally with the social prescribing was to try and reduce the pressure on GP surgeries and the primary care services by, often when people are struggling with anxiety or other things in life, they don't necessarily know where to turn, so they often turn to their GP for that support. And GPs aren't always necessarily the best person to deal with that, and actually it's not tapping into their skills, which is medical side of things. So we're not medical, we're not clinical in any way, we're not social workers, we're not support workers. I'm very clear in what we are not, because sometimes when you say social prescribing, people think, oh, you're social services or you're social care. Like, no, we're not either
or you
of those.
give people drugs of some description,
Yeah, and we don't. Yeah, exactly. With the prescription side of it, like, no, we don't deal with drugs either. So it's a very tailored approach. It is a short-term service. Generally, we can work with people for up to about 3 months, and sometimes we can extend that. We can be flexible with that depending on their circumstances. But I love that role because, you can make a huge difference in people's lives in terms just by introducing to them to a social group or whatever. So there was an elderly gent who I worked with probably a couple of years ago now, and he'd lost his wife. He was really struggling with bereavement. They'd been married a long time, and just a big hole in his life, and really upset about that. So it was around finding him that bereavement support, but also helping him find the confidence to go back out and do things. And I introduced him to a couple of things. So U3A, which is University of the Third Age, if you come across that, for older people or people who's retired. And he joined the cycling club there. He's in his, I think he's in his 80s, but he joined the cycling club and he regularly goes out bike riding with them. And I introduced him to the Chatty Cafe. So the Chatty Cafe is run by Age UK in Barnsley. There's probably a few of them around in my particular area. And it's sort of like a social coffee morning type thing. So very informal, just lots of people there, lots of talking, lots of tea, lots of toast, that sort of thing. But it's a lovely way of getting out of the house and meeting other people. And he's a regular attendee of that. And I still see him regularly, actually, because when I'm taking other clients there, he's there. And he's such a big advocate of social prescribing. And he's always telling people, oh, Rebecca, help me with this. And if it weren't for social prescribing, and what have you. So it has made a huge difference to his life. It's just being signposted to these groups has given him a new lease of life, and it's opened up his social group again. He's developed friends, he's increased his confidence, and it's that side of things that's really, really fulfilling. And that's just a simple example. On some of the other stuff, it gets a little bit more complex. So if people are struggling with benefits, I certainly don't tackle any of the benefit forms because they're so complex, but I can signpost them to organisations that can help with that sort of thing, where they can get advice and stuff. So sometimes it might be a light touch of signposting them to an organisation or referring them on to somewhere else where they can get that right support. And sometimes it's a little bit more involved. So I will go along to some of the groups with them or meet them there. We don't take people, but we will meet them at the group and sort of introduce them or make sure that they don't feel, because it's daunting, walking in somewhere that's new and you don't know anybody. So when you go in with them, it just gives them that bit of extra confidence to do that for themselves. So very varied work, very rewarding, very hard at times. Sometimes it's emotionally challenging, and sometimes you feel like you're hitting your head against a brick wall, either with other services or if people aren't willing to engage, because it will only work if they're willing to go meet you halfway. That's the thing with social prescribing, is people have to be willing to give things a go. And when they do, amazing things can happen.
How do people access these services? As I understand, it is possible you can self-refer, and I know it also depends, you were telling me before, that it depends on the area you're in terms of who provides the service, but it's countrywide, I presume.
Yeah, so social prescribing is definitely countrywide. It will operate differently depending on which sort of local authority you're in. My understanding, in most places, it goes depending on your primary care network. So I do social prescribing in Barnsley, and in Barnsley there is one PCN, primary care network. So our team covers the whole of Barnsley. So there is only one team of us, but we're a big team. There's 20 odd of us that cover the whole of Barnsley. In Sheffield, there are a couple of different PCNs, so it works differently. So they've got different ways of working. But certainly in Barnsley, people can self-refer. That there is a link that they can just click on and self-refer. But most referrals will either come through GP surgeries or maybe social workers or the council housing. So they can come from anywhere, basically. So any other professional can sort of refer them in. And when we say about the GP surgery, they don't have to have a GP appointment to do that. If they just ask at reception, they would be able to put that through for them. So they don't have to have an appointment with a GP to get that referral. So again, that helps to just reduce that pressure on the GPs and what have you. So yeah, we'll get a referral through and then we'll make contact with them. I mean, the nice thing about it in Barnsley is that we can do home visits as well. So if that's appropriate and people feel more comfortable at home, we'll actually go out and visit them at home, or we can meet them in the community somewhere, or we can just speak to them over the phone. So again, it depends on what that person wants and needs. So one of my success stories, actually, I only ever spoke to the lady over the phone. I never met her in person, and I worked with her for a couple of months, probably sort of the full extent. She was incredibly anxious. She didn't like leaving the house. She was quite low in mood and things, and just through talking and signposting to online resources and things like that, and going through some different suggestions and exercises with her, she built up her confidence. And again, she was very proactive. She took on board the suggestions that we talked about, and she actually implemented them. And by the end of it, it was amazing. She had although she still wasn't going out very much, she was doing more, and she was feeling happier in herself. Her family had noticed it as well. And interestingly, a month or so later, I had a referral for her father-in-law. Now, I didn't know he was her father-in-law until after the end of the appointment. I'd been out to see him and his wife at home, and we were chatting, and she said, Our daughter-in-law told us about you. She said it might be you who's coming out. She says, we can't believe the change that we've seen in her. So they'd seen in her the change that social prescribing had. That was absolutely wonderful, because I didn't bring that up. I didn't know that they were related. but because they recognised the name and obviously their daughter-in-law had said who I was and told them my name and everything, they'd put the two and two together and they said who it was. I said, oh yeah, I've been working with it. And they said, we're so delighted what you've helped her achieve and stuff. And obviously, she put the work in and stuff, but that was such a rewarding visit. Not only was I helping this gent, but knowing that I'd helped their daughter-in-law as well was just wonderful. And like I said, I'd only ever spoken to her over the phone. So it just shows you how powerful it is when people are willing to take things on board, and if you can create that safe space for them to share things that's concerning them or whatever. And this is where the coaching skills come in really well with this is, obviously, as you'll know, as a coach, we have to be really good at rapport building, developing that situation where people feel comfortable. So that's invaluable in social prescribing.
You preempted my question, which was going to be basically the relationship between it and coaching, because obviously it's very people focused, as is coaching, but a lot of it sounds like it's advice giving, which at least traditionally coaching might not be. But is there anything else about? Is there anything that you learn from social prescribing that is helpful for coaching as well? What is the interplay between those things for you?
Yeah, I think they complement each other really well. And although technically we're not coaching clients, I find that a really helpful skill to do with that, because I think we bring a different skill set to the role of social prescribing, is we can hold space for people. We can use those coaching questions, because yeah, you're right. In coaching, traditionally, we don't do advice. We might offer suggestions for things sometimes if it's appropriate to do that, but we're not there to give advice. And although we can give advice within or guidance within the social prescribing, actually, it's still more powerful if you can coach them through that, because they've made the decisions themselves. As you'll know, the coach, we're telling people to do things. Either there can be a level of resistance or they don't get onto it because actually it's not their idea and it's not something that they would actually do, so they don't take it on board. It is the same with social prescribing. And what I've learned is, and it's interesting because I see my colleagues doing this sometimes, is you almost overload people with all these different options of groups and services and blah, and they just feel overwhelmed and then they don't take action. So now I do limit that more. I spend more time getting to know them and find out what their interests are, so that I can signpost more appropriately, but also get them to buy into this process. So rather than me telling them, oh, I think you should do this, I can give them suggestions. But I want them to buy into that, because they're going to have more success if they're fully engaged in that process. And the coaching skills really, really help that. And I suppose the other way around, what I've learned through social prescribing is how many different groups and organisations are out there to support people. So sometimes that's been helpful in my coaching, because I've been aware of other organisations that I probably wouldn't have been aware of, or certainly know where to look. And Google is a fantastic tool. It's either word of mouth, or because we're such a big team between us, we've got such a lot of skills and knowledge, and around the local area, or the different background that we all bring to it, or Google. But I now have an inkling. I think I'm sure there will be something for this, where if you're somebody, perhaps you've got a relative who started with dementia and you've never had experience of that, you have no idea what's available out there. You've got no idea what support's available out there. Now, I, as a professional, will know there is lots of support out there for you. So I'm able to then help you find the right one that's tailored more to your needs and things. So yeah, they definitely complement each other.
Really helpful. And I think that sort of extending the analogy to the whole of this podcast is that one of the things that I think makes this podcast useful for people, and that I certainly found, over the long history of this podcast, listening to early episodes and all the way through before I got more formally involved, was that you learn there's so many things that you didn't know about coaching if you were a new coach. You learn there's many more options available to you. And of course, that can lead to sort of, what's it called, always decision paralysis or whatever, where, in the same way that there's lots of different training providers, etc. But at least you get this feeling and where you're able to navigate a bit more okay, this is what I like and this is what I don't like. So you've mentioned, for example, how, you're not going to be the right coach for everybody. I'm not going to be nobody's going to be the right coach for everybody. But for example, the fact that potentially other coaches with different skills who you can refer those people on to means lots of things. It means that person will get the coach who's right for them. You behave with integrity. Those people may get a client or at least a contact. That person might remember you in the future. The coaching profession acts with integrity, and we all uphold the values that we want to see. And if the people who are in your contact network sometimes also recommend people to you in a variety of ways, it's the rising tide carries all boats. And so, but when you're starting off, you don't know about this network and this approach, and that you don't even really necessarily know that there's lots of other people out there muddling through this stuff, trying to work it out, as we all are, however experienced we might be.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a key point there. It is really important to build your network of other coaches. I think that's one of the lovely things about this sector is, you meet such positive people. Who wouldn't want to spend time with another coach, because they're positive, optimistic.
Growth mindset.
Yeah, growth mindset, can-do attitude. So I love working with other coaches, and and again, it's funny because I always laugh when I tell people I've only ever met one coach who was a bit like, "Oh, I'm not sharing information with you," and unfortunately, she does stand out because that's the only person I've ever met.
I feel you should name and shame now, Rebecca.
And it was quite early on, and it was one of those like, "Oh, okay." It was quite funny, but everybody else has been so generous with their time, their knowledge, and because once you start connecting with other coaches, what I found was they would start saying, "Oh, have you heard about such and such, or have you been to this networking event, or have you seen this tool or whatever it was?" And people were so generous, and I like to pay that forward because I've had that myself. I've had a few people who, and they've sort of come out clean, maybe got in touch, and actually they didn't really want coaching, but they wanted to sort of pick my brains about it. And I'm quite happy to do that, or somebody who's new, and I'll just have a chat with them because I think there's always enough clients to go around, always enough clients to go around. And like you said, we're not going to all meet the right clients for us, and we're not always going to be the right coach for the person who comes to us either. So that's the thing. And I always say to my clients is I don't mind if people are, checking it out. So I've had a few people who've said, "I'm looking into coaching, I'm inquiring," and they've been honest and said, "I've approached such and such a person or another person." Sometimes they've given the name and sometimes they've just made it clear that they're getting some ideas. And I think that's a really good thing, is because, if you're investing in any large thing, material or otherwise, you want to know that you're making the right investment in that. So I would always encourage people, to take advantage of those discovery calls. As far as most people that I've met, other coaches offer that free telephone conversation, discovery call, video call, whatever it is, to have that discussion as one, do you think you can actually get on with the other person? Do you like the person? And two, do they have the right skill set and experience for what you're looking for? And if you don't, then don't invest in them because neither of you'll win from that. I think that's the thing. It should always be a win-win situation. If you've got the wrong client, then they aren't going to be an advocate of your services, and they aren't going to be, you want word of mouth of it. You want the right client because you want them to do well, because you want them to tell other people about it. So they come to you. And if you're not doing the right, if you're not doing it in the right way, the integrity thing that you said is hugely important because it will bite you on the bum if you take somebody on for the wrong reasons, So always, always, always act with integrity and don't ever take it personally if somebody doesn't choose you as their coach, because it just means that they're not your ideal client, and you learn the hard way sometimes. There's somebody, so I tend to, and this is a good thing with a discovery call, is using that as a bit of a testing ground, is if people don't show up for a discovery call, then they're not going to be a reliable client, and if they're sort of, I had one lady, she just wasn't in the right place for coaching. I don't think she felt she was, and she wanted help, but I just don't think coaching was the was the right thing for her. So we'd had a call, and then we ended up having another call. I can't remember why we ended up having another call. We had probably, over the space of a few months, she would disappear and then she would come back again and want to. And in the end, again, I think she did disappear, and I thought, that's all right. That's fine. That's a good thing. Anyway, she popped up again about a year later. And I just said to her, look, if things haven't changed, then coaching's still not right for you. Because, unless you're doing pro bono, I think there's a place for pro bono coaching, doing the sessions for free. But you do have to be careful about the amount you do and why you're doing it, because ultimately it's our time, energy and skill that's going into this. And you're doing the service a sort of a disservice if you're doing a lot of free sessions and not charging your worth, because people put a lot of time and energy into qualifying and getting the experience and stuff like that. So yes, do pro bono, but don't be afraid to be charging your worth for it as well, or doing a trade swap. So that's something else. When I started out, I met a lady on one of these business workshops who was a photographer, and she was growing her business. And we ended up doing a trade. So she did some of my original branding photography for my website, which I still use because I love them. She was absolutely fantastic as a photographer. And I worked with her for a series of sessions. So we both won out of that. Although money wasn't exchanged, we exchanged services. So there's often other ways that you can help people. So even if they say they can't afford it, be mindful. And this was something else that somebody gave me a tip about. Be mindful of discounting your sessions. So think about how you can do that. If the person, says money's a problem, and I never like to put people off because of money, so I always try and find ways around it. I'm always happy for people to pay by installments, and I don't charge them any extra. I know some people will put an extra amount on if they're doing it by installments, but I don't. I'm not worried about that. For me, it doesn't bother me. I'll say you can pay in one go, you can pay in installments. I won't charge you any extra. It might be that they say they can't afford it, so maybe we'll tweak the amount of sessions or the time for that. So maybe rather than an hour, they get 45 minutes. So you're not sort of lowering the value of your services. You're just changing how you're delivering them, or you do the trade or whatever. So there's often different ways around it to still make it accessible for people. So if you're just starting out, think outside the box a little bit. What would be helpful to you? Maybe if you're starting your business, can somebody help you with business development side of things? And you can give them some coaching on that, So just think about win-win situation as far as you can.
Those are all really helpful tips. And also when you were saying about, not taking it personally as a coach, if people are don't choose you from a range of people are speaking to, is of course, as coaches, we also have coaches, or will do at some point in the future. And it's like, well, I certainly, if I'm choosing a coach, I want to have that experience for myself, as in, even though I am a coach, if I'm choosing a coach, I want to think I can talk to a variety of people, I can have a discovery session. So even if you're thinking from a coach perspective, if you then wanted to be coached, what would you want? Well, that's probably going to be what other people want. They're probably going to also want to be able to choose or try things or have some flexibility in whatever way works for them. We're coming to the end of our conversation today, and I want to say, in talking about you paying it forward, well, you certainly have been today by all the brilliant things you've been telling people about and the things you've been sharing and your wonderful example. But I wanted to make sure that, was there anything particular that you wanted to mention which we haven't talked about so far?
You've just triggered a point there when you were talking. It is important as coaches that we get coaching. Don't stop learning and developing yourself just because you qualified. I worked with 2 coaches quite early on when I was still sort of learning and new to it. And like I said, I'm on a program at the minute. Just because you qualify doesn't mean that's it. You've got to keep engaging in that CPD stuff and upskilling yourself. So we're both, as you mentioned, we're both members of Sheffield Coaching Exchange. So finding local forums or local groups of other coaches and keep your skills fresh and keep chatting to other coaches is really, really important, I think. So thank you for reminding me of that. I think that is really important. And yeah, don't be afraid of reaching out to people. Don't be afraid of sharing, because you will deliver your content, or the way you do your coaching is unique to you. So it doesn't matter if somebody else, don't see them as competition. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is don't see other coaches as competition, because they're not. It's a really valuable resource for you to tap into, so don't ever be afraid of sharing that experience with other people, because you will gain so much from it as well as them. So be generous with that, but don't undersell yourself. Push through the difficult bits. Getting the pricing right is such a tricky business. And it is hard work. Not many coaches work full time. You'll find that as well. I think often coaches combine things with other jobs or other income streams and things. So don't see it as a failure if you don't make a full-time living from coaching. I think that's the other thing. I had to sort of get my head around that when I started out. After a year or so, I just wasn't generating the income. It was very stressful. I wasn't business orientated, and I'm only slightly better now, to be honest. But so I did get a part-time job, and that's when I got into social prescribing, which was wonderful. So it's made me a better coach by doing that, and it's taken the pressure off me financially as well. So if you combine it with something else, please don't see that as a failure that you've combined it. I think that's the other thing that I would say to anybody who's listening. But yeah, go and play and have fun with it. This is what it's all about, and when you're working for yourself, you need to enjoy it. Otherwise you may as well work for somebody else, get the paid holiday, the pension, and other things. So yeah.
That's really helpful. Loads of tips there. And also, I just think that general message of, coaches not being too hard on ourselves. And what you were saying about that idea of, it's not a failure if you're not doing full-time coaching. And also these things can ebb and flow. Maybe somebody will try being a full-time coach. It won't work out for them. Or have a part-time job or be a full-time coach again. One of the most important things about this podcast is we don't want people to leave the profession because they don't have the networks, tips, inspiration, or sort of roadmap from other coaches that they could have stayed in the profession. But the profession won't be for everybody, as no profession is. And so all of the things you said there, I think will be immensely reassuring to people, to new coaches and to more established coaches as well. And finally then, Rebecca, I was just wondering, obviously we'll put stuff in the show notes, where are the best places for people to find out about your work and contact you? Where should they go?
Thank you. So if you look on my website, that covers pretty much everything that I do. So that's senseofdirection.life. And LinkedIn, I'm active on LinkedIn as well. So if you just search Rebecca Norton or RN Life Coach, I think it is, on there if you search. And I have a page on Facebook as well, which that's RN Sense of Direction on Facebook. So if you connect with me, I'm always happy to chat with people. So yeah, I'm one of those people. I don't have loads and loads of different platforms. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I've got a website. Basically.
That's terrific. And just say as well, seeing as I'm signed up to your email, I can't remember why I signed up to it. Is that easy to find if people go to your website? Then is there somewhere for them to sign up to your email list?
Yeah, thank you for that prompt. I always forget to mention that. So yeah, if they scroll down to the bottom of any page, I think you can subscribe to my newsletter, and that's called Fortnightly Footnotes. So as it says on the tin, I send an email fortnightly. I found that weekly is too much. Monthly, you lose the momentum. So once every 2 weeks, you'll get an email on a Friday. With some ideas in there. I try and make it engaging for people and give you some insights and share about what it is that I'm doing. So I always have some sort of projects, day retreats, or things that I'm working on for you to join in with. And again, I like to try and make my service as accessible as possible. So I know I briefly mentioned Starter for 10. I run that in January, and it's £10 for a 10-day program. It's worth far more than £10. People get so much out of it, but I just, like I say, I want to be able to help people access it at whatever level they want, and if you're working with me one-to-one, then I do one-to-one coaching as well. So yeah, I'd love to connect with people and have a cup of tea or a walk with them. Always good.
That's Rick. And also I'd say that I actually, and I can't say this about every email that I receive, but I always enjoy the tone of your newsletter, and I think actually it's worth coaches signing up to your newsletter, because I think it's a good example of a possible newsletter for coaches, because in my experience of you so far, the tone feels very you. And so I think that, the way in which you use it to build your business and connect with people and put more of yourself into the world is a good lesson for people who want to learn about that too. So I would encourage people to sign up if you'd find it interesting.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Alex.
I can say that, I can say that with integrity because you didn't even know that I'd signed up. I told you before and I really do like the tone of it. So yeah, I can definitely say that. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for speaking to me today and being so generous with your time. And thanks also for giving so many good tips and also for being so open and vulnerable and willing to share your journey with us all today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex.
Hi everybody, Robbie here, and just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of this episode. I'm imagining that means that you think the work we're doing is important and valuable. We think so too. That's why I want to tell you about a way to support the coach's journey and get coaching from me and be part of an amazing group of coaches. That is, join the Coach's Journey community. It's my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches. You pay between £20 and £100 a month and get access to a certain number of group coaching calls each year, plus some one-to-one time with me if you're a full member and various other benefits. And of course, you get the chance to be connected to other amazing coaches on their own journeys. You can join the Coach's Journey community at thecoachesjourney.com/community and find loads more there, including testimonials. One of the additional benefits you get right now is that you get 20% off the cost of a place at the workshop that Claire Pedrick and I are running in Malvern in the UK on the 10th of May, 2025. It's called The Artful Coach and the Soulful Coaching Business, and it's the first time we're working together. You get 20% off just by being a member of the community. You can find out more about that event by finding Claire's latest appearance on the podcast or Googling The Artful Coach and the Soulful Coaching Business. If joining the community isn't right now, but you want to give us some financial support at the Coach's Journey, you can become a supporter of the podcast. There's links to that in the show notes wherever you're listening. And if that's not right for you either, please do click subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to the show. It really makes a difference to us being able to continue to keep this show free. Thanks so much to everyone who supported the Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alex O'Neill, Alex Whitten, Alan Bedding, David Norris, Jessica Jem, Linda Ransom, Lucy Braun, and Michael Trugman for your ongoing support. Thank you too for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.